he was to some
Salem
degree
too.
normalized. He became another Republican nominee. And while a lot of the conservative intellectuals didn't like that or rejected that, and much of the Republican establishment, including many senators, rejected him, something like a fifth to a fourth of all Republican office holders nationwide actively separated themselves from him. Very unusual behavior for Republicans. But by and large,
Reporting
the Republican
outside of Wendy's,
who ever voted
enjoying
Republican
the
came
surge.
around and said, well, on the other hand, if we have Donald Trump, we have the White House, the Senate, we have the House, we have the key vote on the Supreme Court to keep a conservative majority there, that's not such a bad world in comparison with having Hillary Clinton. So they voted for the Republican nominee, love him or not.
Ron, we know what a typical Republican administration in waiting might look like. Donald Trump is not a typical Republican. What would we imagine a Trump cabinet to possibly look like?
There have been a lot of theories already advanced that the people who have been his surrogates, and he has not had a large cast of surrogates by any means.
Talking about Jeff Sessions, Chris Christie, Rudy Giuliani.
That's right. Now, Chris Christie has some legal problems of his own going back to Bridgegate. Some of his associates have been found guilty in a trial in New Jersey, so he may be a little problematic, but he has been the person in charge of the transition team for the Trump campaign. And not a lot of people were paying a lot of attention to that transition team, but they will be tomorrow. And Rudy Giuliani is certainly a very strong prospect to be Attorney General or something of that nature. We have heard Newt Gingrich's name mentioned to have a cabinet position in the top level of cabinet positions.
It's starting to sound sweeter and sweeter.
Some of the other people who have been involved, Jeff Sessions, the senator, and possibly also Kellyanne Conway, the campaign manager, perhaps Steve Bannon, some of the other people who have been powerful, the CEO of his campaign, Steve Bannon, the publisher of Breitbart.com, might have a cabinet-level role.
Now, Breitbart is an organization that has trafficked in
When the liberals start charting
conspiracy
Trump's
theories and
presidency,
outright
I'm feeling pretty
falsehoods
good.
that were once sort of relegated to the fringes. And through Donald Trump, a lot of those sort of conspiracy theories and falsehoods entered the mainstream. Does that, if Donald Trump becomes president, become, I don't know, U.S. administration policy?
At least it becomes, in a sense, mainstream, does it not? I mean, if the media organizations that did support Donald Trump have supported the man who will now be president, if that is the case, then are they then not, in some sense, mainstream organs of the media? When people talk about the media doing their job or not doing their job, the first question to ask is, which media?
Station identification, we're listening to NPR.
What would Trump's first
by radio
100 days look like? Because he's
wonderful
with a good quip and has got really strong rhetoric. There hasn't been a lot of meat on the bone when it comes to policies. And before I get your answers, Sue, Dave, did you want to respond to that, Sue?
I just had a thought on that, because one thing that I've been thinking about throughout the course of this night, too, is two of the bets that Donald Trump made was that the white votes would turn out for him and that traditional Republicans would come home. And I think we've seen that traditional Republicans did come home. And one of the things that I heard throughout this election year, one issue that came up a lot was the Supreme Court. And the next president is going to certainly have one, if not three, vacancies to fill. And that was something that more traditional Republican voters, we heard earlier this evening talking about evangelical voters, that was a significant motivating factor for voting for Donald Trump, in part because he put out a list of justices or potential justices that he would nominate, including people like Mike Lee, the senator from Utah, who won his own re-election tonight. So the first 100 days of the next Congress, at least I can tell you, is going to be consumed by a Supreme Court nomination.
And, you know, it's interesting, when I've talked with Trump supporters, a lot of them cited the Supreme Court. I mean, I think it was perhaps underestimated how people who may not have college degrees are very attuned to this and understand the significance of the court, and that was motivating a lot of people's votes. We are getting analysis and breaking news as we get it to you. You are listening to special coverage of Election 2016. You can follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, our live blog at npr.org.
Be wise and be... Live coverage of Election 2016 from NPR and Iowa Public Radio. I'm Ben Kiefer in Iowa City with Donna Hoffman. Once again, all Iowa congressional races have been called. All the incumbents retain their seats. Rod Blum, Dave Loebsack, David Young, and Steve King. Importantly there, Rod Blum and David Young, the freshman, now will turn to be sophomore congressman representing Iowa in Washington. And also all of the judges, Supreme Court judges, justices, I should say, in Iowa have voted to be retained. Donald Trump projected to win Iowa as well with its 6 electoral votes. Donna Hoffman with us. Also joining us, Dave Anderson of Iowa State University, where he's assistant professor of political science. Dave Anderson, we haven't talked to you yet this evening. What's your reaction?
I think this is an absolutely stunning night. This is an election night we're going to be talking about for decades, if not generations.
And well, okay, Donald Trump has not been declared the next president of the United States, but we're waiting on a few results. Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, a close race there. New Hampshire, a close race. Arizona, still, I suppose, up in the air. But it seems the momentum is in Donald Trump's corner there. So what are your thoughts, Dave, as a political scientist? So many things have been upended. The polls, traditional campaigning thrown into question, I imagine, as well, because Donald Trump was unconventional in everything.
He was the most unconventional candidate we've probably ever seen. And, I mean, if you are a fan of the Republican Party, you should be elated tonight, because he has shown that
I am elated.
The party is just strong. He really changed all the rules, and I think what he's shown is that the party system as we know it has to change. He came in, he broke all the rules, he defied almost all the conventions, and here he is on the brink of being the next president of the United States. It's quite amazing.
If he doesn't win, he will be very close to winning. We'll see what happens in the coming minutes and hours. But Donna Hoffman, your thoughts on how this rewrites, reshapes, explodes the Republican Party?
Well, it's the Republican Party, but as a political scientist, I can also, talk about how it kind of explodes political science as well in some respects. And, the asymmetry of this election is really interesting in terms of the spending, in terms of the ground game, in terms of a lot of things that we knew about campaigns and elections. But to go back to that question you asked about the party, the fact that Donald Trump even got the Republican nomination was very atypical given what we know as political scientists in terms of how people captured their party's nomination. And so a lot of this has to be looked at, and it certainly is very, very earth-shattering in terms of what happens next.
Mm-hmm. Dave, let me ask you a question I asked Donna a while ago in this coverage. What does this say about our polling, that it can be so very wrong, so many polls so very wrong?
Well, this is a kind of a problem with the industry, is that we adopt conventions and we do things that work for a while, but after a while things stop working, and the only way you learn that things stop working is to fail, and fail miserably. This happened with the exit polls.
Fail and fail miserably.
The industry just failed on elections.
Right on.
And we had to relook at how we were doing exit polls and retool them and make them work better. And I think this year we're finding out the polling industry just didn't do it accurately. And we're going to have to spend a lot of time after this election is all over figuring out what exactly went wrong and how we can retool
what went
and make
wrong.
it work better.
Again, Trump not declared president-elect yet. There's still states hanging in the balance there. What would the Democrats, we have just a minute or so, less than a minute, but very quickly, what do the Democrats have to learn from this, Dave?
They have to learn that they have got to find a better way to reach out to voters. There's a lot of anger in America right now. There are a lot of people who want to see things fundamentally change. Barack Obama tapped into that, but since Barack Obama ran really in 2008, the Democratic Party has just been off the mark and has not been addressing this anger.
Dave Anderson, assistant professor of political science at Iowa State University. Thanks for joining us with your observations, Dave Anderson, and until a future politics day. Thanks.
Thank you.
Donna Hoffman will be with us as we continue live coverage of election 2016 from NPR and Iowa Public Radio. I'm Ben Kiefer.
Mean, what are the voters saying in the Rust Belt, for example?
Back to WHO, conservative.
The issue of trade, that really has been an issue that resonates with people, and that's an interesting conundrum for Iowans, because for agriculture, trade is key to financial success. But for factory workers, they see trade as you gave away our jobs to other countries. And so that's an interesting line to walk for Iowans that are involved in the political
process. It's a very complicated issue in Iowa. And I got to say,
clearly Republican control in the governor's office, in the Senate, and the House, as Jeff knows, is one of those be careful what you wish for. And
now we get to have in-party fighting.
Now there's going to be in-party fighting.
And you get blamed for everything.
All the
because
blame.
you're the one who gets the decision-making,
So who knows what's in store for 18, but it's not easy to have all three bodies in a still a purple state. I mean, there's a wave. Iowa's susceptible to waves, but don't buy for a minute that this is a deep red state. It's still very much a purple state, maybe slightly red at this time, but everyone's saying it was slightly blue in 2012. So what a difference 4 years makes.
Yeah, I just want to give you all an update on Pennsylvania. Donald Trump is currently up by half a percentage point, 48.5 to 48, with 93% of the vote in. So if he wins Pennsylvania, again, he's stuck on 254 electoral votes and has been for the past hour or so. If he wins Pennsylvania, it's over. He doesn't need Michigan. He doesn't need Arizona. Doesn't need New Hampshire, which he's also leading in right now. But he wins Pennsylvania, he will be the next president of the United States.
Well, and if he wins Michigan, he'll be
if
the
he
next
wins Michigan too. Yeah, he may win both. He's currently up in both right now, up in Michigan by almost a point with 75% of their vote in. So if he wins Michigan and Pennsylvania, that's 36 electoral votes, and that pushes him, I think, close. No, not quite 300, but almost 300.
Let's go back and talk more about trade, because you were talking about those factory jobs. You know, these were people, some of them were union jobs.
I would have never dreamt it in a million years. I have been sweating bullets.
Wages. They owned houses. They had 2 cars in the garage.
Lost appetite.
Their families on vacation.
Been in deep prayer.
Am I correct? Was it 30 million?
And terror.
Eventually bled out of the country to third world nations where people would work for pennies on.
Well, possibly that's part of it. Also, automation is
fun as long as we have a camera.
Is a part of it, right. But certainly there have been some business leaders and both Democrats and Republicans that have talked about what is your advanced manufacturing strategy for the future. Is there an advanced manufacturing that we can develop in this country to bring manufacturing jobs back? But it has to be a different kind of manufacturing. It's not that because of modernization in factories, that's something that's certainly a challenge. And look, I agree with Brad in regard to sometimes with Trump, there was just generalizations. Like, you've lost all these jobs, I will bring it back, these trade deals are terrible. And those generalizations, those spoke to people.
Well, now if he's president, he's going to have to actually do something about it.
Yeah, and that's where, if you're a Republican, what your hope is, and your hope began with the selection of Mike Pence as vice president, that he would surround himself with conservative free market minds that would give him innovative ideas that he would propose. That's what your hope is. But it is a hope. It really is. You now have to start putting some specific points to what have been some general concepts in the election.
You know, back when the first of those free trade agreements went through, NAFTA went through, it was a Republican Congress.
Yeah.
And some of those same people who we're talking about surrounding Trump with were actually involved and then it got rubber stamped by Bill Clinton, and then those jobs went away. And now you were talking about technology companies like when the technology can do the work and they don't have to hire a bunch of people because it's cheaper.
Yeah, and again...
So how do we create these well-paying jobs? You can't just yank back those trade agreements, and I don't know if that's even enough.
Right. I think that, again, you have to talk a little bit about advanced manufacturing. You have to also... I do think that Iowa is in a really interesting situation in the future because NAFTA and trade, opening up trade markets is good for agriculture. And yet at the same time, there are so many small communities, some of which I represented in the state Senate, that had what I would just call old-fashioned factories. You went out into the line and you were putting parts together and you were putting equipment together, and those jobs did disappear with NAFTA. So it's a fine line to walk when you're talking about, well, you know, maybe these trade agreements haven't been good for America, but the agricultural community looks toward these robust trade agreements to continue to keep that economy growing.
Right, and we do live in a global economy, and I know there are a lot of soybean farmers today who are looking at their China market right now and saying, well, what does this mean? Because what Trump is talking about is not just tweaking trade agreements. He's talking about ending